Hi, I'm Bram.
Hi, I'm Jelle. Bram, you are going to explain to me something that I really should know. Is that correct?
That's correct. I wanted to talk to you about testing types.
Testing types.
Different kinds of tests.
Are we talking about successful tests and failed tests, or?
That's the bottom line. That's the takeaway. But there's different kind of tests. As you can imagine, we have developers often make unit tests, right?
Correct.
So you're used to that. You make a function, you make a unit test, see if it works.
Yes,
and
because
then it's
all developers write unit tests, right? Yes.
No, not exactly, but they should.
Yes.
In an ideal world, they should. And sometimes you don't have unit tests, like you said, or you have them, but you also have visual components. You often make a website, and that's where you use UI tests, for example, to see if the UI is what it should be. And I know that we all know what these test types should be. Mm-hmm. We learned that somewhere along our
educational
journey, our career. But it's not always the case, and it's always good to reiterate these basic things once in a while.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch upon the subject real quick, and I'm going to do this with a picture, with a testing pyramid.
What are we looking at? The testing pyramid.
The testing pyramid is layered. That's the first thing that you'll see, and each layer represents a different kind of test. Unit test, we discussed this already, but if you take it a step higher, you want to integrate your solution in your existing software.
Yep.
Then you're going to do something like an integration test, for example.
Yeah.
Does it fit? Does it work with everything else? After that, you can imagine there's an API or a UI, and then you can automate this stuff. You can write tests to see if your UI works. Next to that, in the top of the pyramid, there's this icon of a person. That's manual testing. So why is this on the top and why is it so small? Well, the basis of the pyramid describes how many tests of each you should have.
Yeah. So in an ideal world, if I follow the pyramid, I have a lot of unit tests, and there's only a very little need for manual testing.
Exactly, because manual testing takes time, it's expensive, it's done by people, not machines, so you cannot spin up 2 or 3 or 10. You just have 1 or 2 testers in a team, maybe, if you're lucky.
You can make overtime, but yeah, continue.
You can make overtime, but in the end of the week, we all want to go to the 4 o'clock meeting, right?
Yeah. So these are the types that you were referring to. This is how you classify tests.
This is how you classify tests, and also maybe a little bit depends on your philosophy, how you should prioritize your tests. So as a tester, we often start in the top. Pure functional testers are the ones who use the system as a user would, and along with your specifications, you can see if it works.
So all testing is done with manual testing?
Not all testing is done manually all the time, but the first time you do it by hand to see if it works. For example, if you make a new API, and I'm going to test your API, first thing we are going to do is agree on the specs, right?
Yeah.
So that's where testing starts. For me, at least, that's my definition.
You start in the requirements phase.
You start in the requirements phase.
Yep.
Yeah. You go write and then we agree. You go write your nice little API.
I go write my little API. You do you. Yeah.
I go write my little API test.
Yeah.
And after X time, we come together, and we should have a green test because we're both good at our jobs. And it's an ideal world, and everything's green. But before I automate my tests, what we're going to do is. You're going to show me what you did, and I'm going to click on stuff and see if it works, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to focus on automation.
Yes.
So every test we do by hand at least once in my world. But then we can take it a step further. So there's more than integration tests.
You can introduce more and more layers.
You can introduce a lot of layers. This is an example, and this is a weird one. It says smoke testing, for example. I don't necessarily agree that it's there because a smoke test is often a UI test. That's what we mean with it. Then again, there's even more testing that we can do, all with a different purpose. And the takeaway is that you should use the test that is appropriate for that level of the level of software you're gonna use.
Yeah.
So, for example, you have your API. we just agreed on that it's green and that's good. It can go to production. But it's going to interact with a lot of other APIs. Maybe it's put something on a message bus. So what's going to happen is that you're going to do a system test or a system integration test, depends on your definition, to see if it works with your neighbor's work, right? Or you do interface testing, for example.
Yeah.
Because that's important as well. It's a different kind of API testing. It depends on your definition again, but
again, it would be a great world where all the definitions of all the different types and all the names of all the different types of testing would be uniform. That's not the case. So I would start within the team to at least start speaking a common language if you talk about different testing types. Because what you call smoke testing, I may not call smoke testing, etc.
Exactly. That's what we see in this pyramid, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually great advice for everybody, not only in your team, but maybe across your teams. If we are going to do a end-to-end test, for example, my system versus your system, then we need to agree. We have to have common ground. Otherwise, you're talking to a wall. Doesn't help.
So the interesting part is you said I'll always start testing manually. But
yes.
I developer hat. I start with my unit test. Even usually before I start testing my code manually, sometimes even before writing my code, I'm going to pretend that I always do that. I start writing my unit tests. So do we come in from different angles? That I start with a lot of automated tests on a very small target surface, and you start broadly from the top and you come down? Or how do you approach this?
Again, it depends on what you are testing, because an API, you're not going to test visually, right?
We have stuff like Swagger UI, but I understand what you mean.
Okay, but that's a tool, right? So then I would use I can use any HTTP request. I can do it with my browser, but I can also use Swagger or
browser,
I can use
Swagger, Postman,
whatever. But I was going to ask you. Because you said implicitly that you write your test first, right? And then
try to be able to do that, and especially if I am in a somewhat greenfield application, that's a possibility. Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you this: how many times do you write your test successfly the first time?
Never.
So that's manual testing, in a way.
So we're doing a definition thing again, but that's a very good way of thinking about it. So. You cannot have automated testing of any type without first doing some manual testing. But in the end, you should try to reduce the amount of manual testing as much as possible.
Automate the boring stuff, automate the stuff that you have to do a lot, because it will say, not because to prove something, of course you want to prove something, but you want to have time left for other stuff. If you automate 80% of your work, you can spend that time that you gain by exploratory testing, for example. Or maybe use any kind of non-functional tests, like load testing or stress testing.
Yeah.
Because these types of tests are often come after the fact. We focus on getting things done, getting green lights everywhere.
The button works. It takes like 5 seconds before it does anything. We really should have tested that too. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's the type of testing that gets overlooked a lot of times. Security testing, that's a very important one. We are doing it more and more these days because it's a requirement, because of law, because of everything, and because we want to. So if you automate, you have time left for other stuff.
So it's a beautiful bit of theory, this, where you can divide into types and even subtypes and categories. So the $1 million question, why does it matter? Why not just say automated tests and be done with it? Then everyone understands what you mean. Why is the categorization of test types so important? You said it was a basic skill.
Yeah, because you have to do the right thing at the right time. So it's your Swagger UI remark was a good one, because you don't have to use Swagger AI. Because you can test your API a much, much simpler way. It's a great tool, don't get me wrong. I use it, I like to use it. But I can do HTTP requests real quick to prove your stuff works. So there's no use for me to automate something with Swagger if I can do it faster and easier.
So if I can paraphrase you slightly, it is very important to know what type of test you're using, because otherwise it's very hard to prioritize your testing activities.
Yeah, and to really dumb it down, don't use a hammer if you need a screwdriver.
Very good advice. Yeah, that's very clear, and a very nice return to basics. And potentially for some a very nice introduction to testing basics.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye everyone.
Bye.